They don't tell you what it feels like when the work stops, when the alarm clock no longer rings, when your title disappears, when the busy calendar suddenly opens wide. There's no farewell speech for identity, no guidebook for what it means to wake up and not be needed the same way anymore. Retirement. It sounds like freedom, and in many ways it is. There's rest, relief, the ability to breathe without the weight of deadlines. But beneath the quiet, for many of us, there's something else. A question, a deep, unfamiliar question that whispers when the noise of obligation disappears. Who am I now? Because for decades, our sense of self is often tied to our job, our usefulness, our productivity. We wake up with purpose because someone else expects us to show up. And then suddenly, no one is asking anymore. The world is quieter, but the soul still speaks. And mine did too. In the first days after retirement, it came not as a shout, but a whisper, a gentle stirring. What do I do now? What is my reason to rise each morning, now that the structure is gone? At first, I didn't have the answer. I wandered. I lingered in pajamas. I stared out the window a little too long. And in that aimlessness, I began to feel something I hadn't made space for in years. Possibility. What if purpose wasn't something you chased, but something you noticed? What if it didn't live in job titles or accolades, but in stillness, in new beginnings? This is the story of how I found that answer, not in a grand revelation, but in small steps, in quiet moments, in trial and error, joy and grief. This is what purpose can look like after retirement. And maybe, just maybe, it's the truest purpose I've ever known. The first morning after I retired was one I'll never forget. I woke up to a quiet house, sunlight slipping in through the blinds, and for the first time in over 4 decades, no reason to rush. No emails, no meetings, no one expected me to be anywhere. It was the kind of morning I used to dream about during busy work weeks, and yet I didn't feel free. I felt lost. There was a heaviness in the silence that caught me off guard. I stayed in bed longer than usual, not out of relaxation, but because I didn't know what came next. When your life has followed a schedule for so long, freedom can feel like floating in open water without a map. That morning, I didn't miss the office. I didn't miss the stress, but I did miss something I couldn't name at first. Eventually, I realized I missed purpose. Work had been more than a paycheck. It gave my days shape. It gave me a role. It gave me a reason to get up and show up. And now, all of that was gone. It's funny how quickly we define ourselves by what we do. When people asked me who I was, I gave them my job title, my responsibilities, my accomplishments. But when that was no longer part of the answer, I was left standing there with a deeper question. Who am I without it? Retirement, I've found, begins with a quiet kind of grief. The loss of structure, the loss of identity. But hidden within that grief is also the seed of something new, something hopeful. Because once the noise dies down, you can hear yourself again. And that voice inside you, it still wants to grow. So that morning, I started a different kind of search. Not for a new title, not for a hobby to fill time, but for a new kind of purpose. One that came not from being needed by others, but from reconnecting with myself. For most of my life, purpose meant productivity. It meant long hours, clear goals, and the satisfaction of crossing items off a list. It was about performance reviews, promotions, and deadlines met. Purpose was something you earned, proved, and protected through action. But retirement unraveled that definition almost overnight. Suddenly, no one was measuring my performance. No one needed a report from me, or an update, or a signature. The structure that once defined my sense of value had quietly slipped away, and in its place was a blank space, one that both frightened and intrigued me. So I asked myself, what if purpose isn't about achievement anymore? What if it's about something quieter, something gentler, What if purpose now is found not in what I do, but in who I am becoming? That single shift in thinking changed everything. I began to notice that purpose could live in the smallest of things. It was in making a warm breakfast for myself and actually sitting down to enjoy it. It was in calling an old friend, not because I had to, but because I wanted to reconnect. It was in holding space for my grandchild to talk. Without offering solutions, just listening. I started seeing value in being present instead of productive, in offering attention instead of answers. And the more I leaned into this new kind of purpose, the more grounded I felt. There was a richness to my days, not because I had accomplished a lot, but because I had shown up fully. Purpose, I realized, didn't need to be impressive. It didn't need a title or a paycheck. It just needed intention. And once I let go of chasing significance, I found something far more meaningful. A life filled with quiet purpose, rooted in presence, kindness, and a deep sense of being exactly where I was meant to be. I'd always wanted to learn how to paint. Not to display my work in a gallery, not to win prizes, just to feel what it was like to put color to canvas. But, like many things in life, painting always came second. First came the job, then the children, then the bills, then the years that slipped by, one busy season after another. When I retired, I found myself with something I hadn't had in a very long time. Time without guilt, time that wasn't borrowed or squeezed in between obligations. And one day, without overthinking it, I bought a small set of brushes and a few tubes of paint. The first strokes were clumsy. The colors didn't blend like I thought they would. My hand, less steady than it once was, didn't always follow the image in my mind. But I kept going. Not to become an artist, but to remember what it felt like to be curious. That's what learning something new gave me, the return of wonder. We often think learning is for the young, but what I discovered is that learning at 70 or 80 is a different kind of joy. It's not about achievement, it's about awakening. Every new technique I tried, every color I mixed, stirred a part of my brain and spirit that had been quietly sleeping for years. And it wasn't just painting. I started reading about topics I'd never explored before. I asked my grandchildren to teach me how to use my phone better. I began to see the world again, not as something I'd already figured out, but as something still unfolding before me. That's when I realized this too was purpose. To keep growing, to stay open, to be a student of life even now. Because when we stop learning, we start fading. But when we stay curious, we stay alive inside. In my working years, recognition was part of the rhythm. A good performance review, a raise, a handshake in the hallway, and a thank you email sent to all the right people. That acknowledgement fed something inside me, a sense of value, of being seen. But in retirement, all of that fades. No one hands you a certificate for helping your neighbor take in their trash bins. No one claps when you quietly leave flowers on a grieving friend's doorstep. No one updates your resume when you show up at a local library to shelve books simply because it gives you joy. And yet, these are the moments that have brought me the most peace. I discovered a different kind of giving, the quiet kind, the kind that asks for nothing in return. Helping someone carry groceries up the stairs, calling an old friend just to listen, slipping a kind note into a donation bag at the community center. These acts don't come with fanfare, but they come with meaning. Because service without recognition is freedom. You're not doing it for praise, you're doing it because it feels right. Because being useful, being kind, being present, that's a form of purpose all its own. And something beautiful happens when you give without expectation. You feel full instead of drained, rooted instead of rushed. You realize that some of the most profound impact you can make happens in complete silence. There's something healing about showing up without being asked, about offering help without needing a thank you. In those moments, I feel more connected to my humanity than I ever did in a boardroom. Purpose doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's a whisper, a gentle nod, a quiet act that no one sees but you. And sometimes that whisper, it echoes longer than any applause ever could. With more time came fewer distractions, and with fewer distractions came things I hadn't wanted to face. Old emotions, lingering regrets, relationships I left unresolved. They started to surface, not all at once, but gently, steadily, like dust settling after years of movement. Retirement gave me space, and in that space, I found the courage to begin repairing. I started with simple things: the broken step on the back porch, the squeaky cabinet door, the cluttered closet I'd been ignoring for years. It felt good to fix things with my hands, tangible, achievable, one small problem solved at a time. But as I worked on the physical, I realized there were deeper things that needed attention. The broken relationship with my brother that had frayed years ago over a misunderstanding neither of us could quite remember. The resentment I carried from a decision made in haste decades earlier. The guilt I felt for words never said, to a friend, to a parent, even to myself. So I began doing the harder work. I wrote letters. Some I sent, some I didn't. I made phone calls I'd been putting off. I started speaking more honestly, even when it was uncomfortable. And maybe most importantly, I sat with my thoughts, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones. That emotional work, the mending of invisible things, became a kind of sacred practice, a new form of purpose. Because peace isn't something that finds you while you're busy avoiding it. It's something you build, one honest conversation at a time, one brave apology, one choice to let go instead of hold on. And what I found through all that inner work is this: when you repair what's been broken inside and out, you don't just make peace. And that too is purpose. A quiet, steady, healing kind of purpose. The kind that reshapes not just your life, but your spirit. It wasn't until I slowed down that I realized just how many stories I had collected over the years. Stories I had lived, stories I had witnessed, stories I had carried silently, waiting for the right time and the right heart to share them with. Some were painful, stories of mistakes and heartbreak and lessons learned the hard way. Others were lighthearted, moments that made me laugh then and still make me smile now. And many were somewhere in between, unfinished threads still waiting for their meaning to be revealed. Retirement gave me the time, but reflection gave me courage. I began telling my stories, not to lecture, but to connect, not to impress, but to pass something down. I started with my grandchildren, answering their questions not with advice, but with memories. I visited local schools and community groups, offering to speak not about my career, but about what I had learned from life. I even began writing them down, just a notebook at first, then a second, then more. There's something powerful that happens when you give voice to your story. You begin to remember yourself, not just who you are now, but who you've been, the chapters that shaped you, the people who changed you, the moments that tested you, and the ones that held you together. The stories helped me make peace with my past. They helped others understand where they came from, and most surprisingly, they reminded me that my life still had something to offer, not in productivity, but in perspective. We spend our lives collecting wisdom. Retirement is the perfect time to share it. Because legacy isn't built in buildings, it's built on stories, told and received. It's built in the laughter of a child hearing something for the first time, in the tears of someone who finally feels understood, in the pause that follows a well-told truth. We are all walking libraries, and when we tell our stories, we don't just pass on information, we pass on life. There was a time when mornings meant chaos. I'd fly out of bed the second the alarm rang, rushing to meet the day. Emails, deadlines, meetings, commuting. The coffee was gulped down, not enjoyed. Mornings weren't something I lived through, they were something I got through. But now they're different. These days, I ease into the morning. I sit by the window, a warm cup of coffee in hand, and I watch the light change across the floor. I listen to the birds. Not just hear them, but listen. I feel the steam from the mug against my face, the softness of my robe, the quiet hum of the house settling into its day. And I've come to realize something I missed for years. There is magic in the ordinary. Retirement slowed me down, and at first I mistook that slowness for emptiness. I thought if I wasn't doing something, I wasn't being anything. But now I know that's not true. Slowness isn't emptiness, it's awareness. It's presence. In these simple, often overlooked moments, I've found a peace that no promotion ever gave me. I've found clarity, gratitude, even joy. And more than anything, I've found purpose. Because when you begin to truly notice life, when you stop rushing past it, you begin to feel connected to it again. You begin to feel alive. There's purpose in watering the plants, in folding the laundry with care, in preparing a quiet breakfast and actually tasting it. These aren't chores, they're rituals. They're gentle affirmations that life is happening, and you're here for it. I used to think fulfillment came from big moments, but now I understand. It lives in the spaces in between. And when you pay attention to the ordinary, you realize there's nothing ordinary about it at all. As I've grown older, I often find myself thinking about my younger self, the one who tried so hard, who worried he wasn't enough, who measured his value in milestones, paychecks, and praise. He was always running toward something, or away from something. It's hard to tell which, looking back. If I could go back, I don't think I'd give him advice. He wouldn't have listened anyway. He thought he had to figure it all out himself. But maybe I would just sit with him. Maybe I'd place a hand on his shoulder and say, "You're doing better than you think." So now, I try to be that person for others. For the young adults navigating their first heartbreaks or career stumbles. For the new parents overwhelmed with the noise and the needs and the never-ending to-do lists. For anyone who feels like they're falling behind, when in truth, they're exactly where they need to be. Sometimes I offer a story drawn from memory. Sometimes I offer silence, a safe space for someone else to fill. Most often, I simply listen, not to fix, not to teach, but to witness. Because presence can be more powerful than any advice. You reach a point in life where you realize wisdom isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to walk beside someone who's asking the same questions you once did. And that, I learned, is a purpose worth waking up for. To be a calm voice in the noise. To be a steady presence when life feels uncertain. To be the person you once needed, now when someone else needs it most. Not with perfection, but with kindness, with patience, with open hands and an open heart. That's what I tried to offer now. A calm voice, a listening ear, a place to land. There's a quiet kind of grace that arrives with slowness, not just the slowing of the body, but of the mind, the days, and the rhythm of life itself. I used to move fast, think fast, react fast. I measured my worth in how much I could get done in a day, how efficient I could be, how quickly I could solve a problem and move on to the next. There was pride in my pace. But now, I don't move like I used to. And strangely enough, that's where the peace began. Slowness at first felt like something I had to fight. I thought it meant decline. I thought it meant I was falling behind. But over time, I've learned something much more important. Slowness is a teacher. It teaches you to breathe, to pause, to notice what you've been rushing past for years. In stillness, I began to hear my own thoughts again. I noticed the birds outside my window. I found joy in sitting on the porch, watching the world move while I stayed still. I began to see that just because I wasn't moving quickly didn't mean I wasn't moving forward. And somewhere along the way, I stopped needing to prove anything. I no longer measure my value by how many things I check off a list. I've started measuring it by how deeply I show up in each moment. Some days are slow, some are quiet, some stretch out longer than expected. But in that slowness, I've found space for reflection, for gratitude, for presence. There's purpose in being, not just doing, in being content, in being at peace, in being where you are, exactly as you are. So if slowness has found you, don't fear it. Welcome it, let it soften you, let it ground you. Let it remind you that the most sacred parts of life often whisper, and they only reveal themselves when we finally slow down enough to listen. For a long time, I thought purpose was a destination. Something to chase, something to reach. Like a trophy on a shelf or a title etched on a door. I believed that once you found it, you were set for life, that purpose was fixed, permanent, final. But now I understand something deeper. Purpose evolves. What mattered to me in my 30s, the drive to succeed, the desire to provide, the need to prove myself, was real and important. But it isn't what matters most to me now. And what matters today, it may shift again in the years to come. And that's not failure, that's growth. Because life isn't static, and neither are we. We are always unfolding, always becoming, and that means our purpose will too. The beauty of retirement is that it gives you room to reflect, to reassess, to realign. It allows you to return to what matters, and sometimes to discover new meaning in old places. You get to redefine what success looks like. Maybe it's not about reaching new heights, but about reaching deeper into your own soul. Maybe it's not about building something out there, but nurturing something in here. And in that unfolding, you realize purpose doesn't only live in doing, it lives in being, in becoming. And who you are becoming today, that's just as important, just as worthy as who you were yesterday. Because the truest kind of purpose isn't locked in one moment of time. It's a lifelong relationship, one that evolves as we do. So if your purpose feels different than it once did, let it. That's not the end of something. That's the beginning of something even more true. So if you've just retired, or if you're years into it, and you're wondering, what now? Here's what I'd tell you. Your purpose didn't retire, it just changed. It may be quieter now, more personal, more inward, but it's there. In the small routines, in the relationships you nurture, in the stories you share, in the peace you create. You're still becoming, you're still learning, you're still needed. And the world? It still needs your wisdom. So if you're in that quiet space, where the world feels slower, where old rules have faded, and the question, what now, lingers in your heart, please remember this. Your purpose didn't end with your career. It didn't vanish when the meetings stopped or when the children grew up. It simply shifted, softened, deepened. You are not done becoming. There is still more of you to uncover, more to give, more to feel, more to love. Because purpose isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whispered conversation, a lure, a hand held in silence, a morning spent in stillness. A story passed down with care, and that quiet, grounded kind of purpose, it may be the most meaningful one of all. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own journey or someone you love, I invite you to like, subscribe, and join our growing community here at Elderly Truths. Together, let's honor the wisdom that time has given us, one story at a time. Until next time, the gardeners stay well, stay curious, and never forget, you still matter. You still have purpose, and your story is far from over.